Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding on Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we'll be learning today Mir Hashem Daf Pei Daled Amud Beis. We pick up today on Pei Daled Amud Aleph. We are holding in Siman Nun Gimel and we pick up Pei Daled Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. Siman Nun Gimel Sif Chav Hey. We are continuing to learn the halachos of a shliach tzibbur, who you can appoint, who you cannot appoint, when you remove a shliach tzibbur from his appointed position, when you do not. And it's worth mentioning that we've already seen in the Mishnah Berurah that the way these halachos are laid out in the Mechaber, in the Ramah, in the Mishnah Berurah, not so negeya nowadays. Nowadays, the decision to appoint, the decision to remove a shliach tzibbur is really up to the gaboim, the board members, so to speak. I would say the leaders of the Kehillah, the appointed, not self-appointed people, but the ones who have been appointed as being in charge of the tzibbur shazachen, those are the ones who make these decisions, and a yachid really has no right to protest. So now we're here on Pei Daled Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom, Sif Chav Hey. Ein misalkin chazan me umanusai. We do not remove a shliach tzibbur from his appointed position, ela in kem nimtza by psul, unless we found out that he really has a psul. There is really something that renders him puzzled to be a shliach tzibbur, along the lines of what we've learned at the very beginning of this siman. At the very beginning of this siman, we said a shliach tzibbur tzar sheyahagun. He has to be worthy, and we said he has to be reikon me'averos, he has to be free of averos. He has to be somebody who didn't have a shame ra go out on him, somebody who doesn't have an ill reputation. So once we appoint somebody as a shliach tzibur, we don't remove him from that position unless we really find out that he has a psul. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Kat 9 Gimel, Chazan me umanusai, v'hu adid l'chol hismanus. This is not just a chazan. This talks about any appointment over the tzibur. Whenever you have a position that somebody was given and it's not for a fixed amount of time, if somebody has a position for a fixed amount of time, so then when that time slot is over, the position is over. But when you have an appointment and you appointed somebody for an indeterminate amount of time, and now you want to remove him, you cannot remove him unless you find a psul. And this is by a chazan, by a shliach tzibur, and any other kind of appointment. I would say like a magid shir or something else. V'atam, the Mishnah Berurah says, the reason for this is shelo yechoshtom shenimtza behem psul. The reason why you can't remove the individual is when you remove somebody from a position, that makes tongues start to wag, and people start to say, oh, if they removed him from his position, maybe it's because they found a psul. And now suddenly you damage the reputation, not only of that individual, but it could be of his family as well. Says the Chavetz Chaim, it doesn't simply mean that you found a rumor of a psul, it has to be be'edim. When we say that you could remove him if you found a psul, that's if edim came and testified that he has a psul. V'az ein mekabel ma'isai ad sheyosher b'tshuva shleima bali arma umirma. If edim came and they testified that this individual has a serious psul that causes you to remove him from his position, if he wishes to be reinstated in his position, you cannot reinstate him unless you know that he did tshuva shlema bali arma umirma, without any trickery. It's a real honest tshuva. Aval b'shvua ba'alma shelo yelech b'drachim elu loy mahani. If he comes back begging for his position back, and he says, look, I'll make a shvua, I'll take an oath that I'm not going to repeat those offenses that you found out about me, that's not enough. And the Chavetz Chaim says there's a very interesting reason why that's not enough. What? You're going to trust the fact that he made a shvua? He did the avera. Before he committed the avera, right? You had Edim that he committed an avera. Before he committed the avera, he was mushba v'oimin ma'ar Sinai. He made a shvua already by Har Sinai to listen to the Torah. And obviously Adam came and said he abrogated that shvuah. So now if he comes and he makes a shvuah, a big deal. He abrogated his shvuah from Har Sinai. He'll abrogate the shvuah that he makes to you now. So the only way you could reinstate him is if you really see that he did a tshuva shalema. Okay, let's go right to here. Says the Ramah, 2 lines from the bottom, near the end of the line. Haga, ve'ein misalkin oisai mishum rinun ba'alma. You don't remove somebody from a position because of rinun. Rinun is, chattering, rumors. You don't remove somebody from a position because a rumor went around. Kigoin, for example, sheyotza olav shem shenitfas im hakutis. A rumor went around that he was caught with a shiktzah. So it's a rumor. It hasn't been substantiated. You can't remove somebody from a position because of a rumor. Oisha Masar Adam. Or a rumor went around that he did Mesira, that he went ahead and he handed somebody over to government officials. But again, it's if these things were substantiated. If we had Adam that came and said, look, there's Adam that testified that he was together with an Eina Yehudis. If such a thing chas v'chalila happened, so then you have to remove him from his position. He's not ready to be a shliach tzibbur. If Adam come that say, listen, he had a vendetta against another Yid and he handed him over to the authorities for something, so then he's a meiser. He can't be a shliach tzibur. But if it's only rumors, you can't remove him from his position based on rumors. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Ayin Zayin. Ayin Vav. Ayin Hey. Ve'ein misalkin, 3 lines off the bottom. Ve'ein misalkin, you can't remove somebody from a position based on a rumor. But if a rumor came out on an individual before you appointed him, then then you refrain from appointing him even just based on the rumor. Even if the rumor is not a rumor that he did something now. The rumor is that he did something wrong years ago when he was young. Still, you don't appoint him. This is like we said earlier in Sif Dalid, where we said, Afilu yotza alav shem rabbi al dusay. Even if somebody had an ill reputation in his youth, you don't appoint him as a shliach tzibur. Why? Because ein pirkoi noeh. His reputation is not nice. You don't send up somebody to be a shliach tzibur, to be the agent davening on behalf of the tzibur, to bring the tefillos up to Shamayim, who's somebody who has an ill reputation. However, even though you don't remove a shliach tzibur because of a rumor that went around, but you do have to do, says the Chavetz Chaim, you sit a bezdin, and you empower and impanel a bezdin to investigate the matter and find out if it's true or not. Shliach tzibur shebitoi zinso tachas baila. Let's say you have a shliach tzibur chas v'chalila. You have a shliach tzibur whose daughter was mezana while she was married. Ein lemanoisei lechatchila. You don't appoint this person lechatchila to be a shliach tzibur, even though he didn't do anything wrong. It's his daughter, but it doesn't matter. You don't appoint him lechatchila to be a shliach tzibur. Achim naseh ze acher shekvar nismana. If the story happens after he was already appointed, Nira de'en lo hiridoi b'shvel zeh, Chavetz Chaim says it would appear that you cannot remove him from his position. Now, why would you not take a shliach tzibur whose daughter was mezana? What does that have to do with him? Well, we know there's a pasuk in Chumash that speaks about a kohen. The pasuk says, "Ubas kohen kiseichel liznois." The daughter of a kohen, if she goes and she's mezana, es avia hi mechaleles. She is mechalel. She destroys the reputation of her father. There's a Gemara, I believe it's Gemara in Sanhedrin, that says that you're not noyed kedusha with him anymore. He's still a kohen, but you don't treat him with the respect due to a kohen anymore because his daughter did such a thing. Or he gave over another yid to the authorities. If you have a shliach tzibur who intimidated another yid by threatening him that he will hand him over to the authorities, V'loy Mosar. Abalamaisi, he didn't do it. So he used it as a threat, but he didn't do it. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Alfa Pisha Mechur Adavar, even though this is certainly despicable, Afilu la'adam she'eno shliach tzibbur, that's a despicable thing to do even for somebody who's not a shliach tzibbur. Eno nifsal al kach, doesn't become puzzled to be a shliach tzibbur because of such a threat. Ella, rather, goyarin boy, you do protest very strongly against him. Umasrin boy, and you warn him, she'em Yosef loymar kadvarim alalu, that if he's going to continue speaking in this manner, threatening people, sheyaviru mima'alosai, that you will remove him from his position, v'im hoisif b'merdai, and if he continues in this way of rebellion where he's doing such things, ra'oi lahaviroi, it would be proper then to remove him from his position. Okay, continues the Ramah, the last words on Pei Daled Amud Aleph. Aval, however, so far the Ramah said, you don't remove a shliach tzibur from his position based on rinun ba'alma, based on just a rumor. Aval, however, now says the Ramah, imbo alav edim bazeh, if edim come and they testify that he was with a shiktzah, they testify that he was a meiser, the chayotza bazeh, or other things that would render him apostle, ma'avir noisai, then certainly you do remove him from his position. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kanayin Ches Alav Edim, if Edim come. Umedivrei HaMagen Avram Le'el B'sif Katan Zayin Mashma, from the words of the Magen Avram earlier, it is implied, Da'afilu B'kala Delay Pasik, even if you don't have Edim, but what you do have is more than a simple rumor. You have a Kala Delay Pasik. Kala Delay Pasik is a rumor that somehow is sticking around. Now, how long it has to stick around, that is spoken about, but a kol delay pasik is already, somehow this is a rumor that's just not dying out. And therefore, you do have to give it more credence than just a rumor, yaps, I once heard a zazach. But if it's a rumor that's sticking around, that everybody's saying about this guy, these things, that's something you have to be choshish for more. And the Chavetz Chaim says that from the Magen Avram it is mashma, that by a kol delay pasik, Yachid Meicha Alav La'avirai, a single individual could protest and demand that this shliach tzibur should be removed. V'chein mashma b'yam shel shloimei in Chulin Seif Siman Nun Beis v'ayin b'biur halacha. Ois kat nayin test. The Ramah said that if you have edim ma'avirin oisai, then you do remove him from his position. V'yam also tshuva, if after you remove him from his position he does tshuva, let's say you have these rumors and you have Edim, but you find out that he did tshuva. Mahani shelo l'salkai af im avar b'mezid. So you had a shliach tzibur, and you have Edim now that establish that this shliach tzibur did something terrible, like the examples that were given here. He was caught with a shikta. So you have Edim. It's not just a rumor, you have Edim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, im asa tshuva, if he really does tshuva. Look, the Rebbeinu Shalom accepts tshuva. You know, the world nowadays is sometimes of the opinion that somebody goofs up on something once, somebody does something wrong, he's tarnished forever, he's ruined forever. The Rebbeinu Shalom is bekabel tshuva. So the Chavetz Chaim says, im asa tshuva, mahani shaloi l'salkai, the tshuva is effective and you cannot remove him from his position. Af im avar b'mezid, even if what you caught him on, what the Edom are testifying on, is an avera that he mamish did b'mezid, still tshuva helps so that you don't remove him. Aval limanoisai, but to initially appoint him, mavur b'sifhei b'hagah, that we already saw earlier in sifhei in the Ramah, de b'mezid loy mahani tshuva. Somebody did an avera b'mezid. Even if you know he did tshuva, you cannot appoint him l'chatchila to be a shatzibur de'ein perkei noeh, because that's called ein perkei noeh. He doesn't have a good reputation. Somebody with a bad reputation, you don't appoint to be a shatzibur. V'ayin sham b'Mishnah Berurah sif katan chav beis. V'em asa b'yaldusai avera v'adayin loy shav. If you know that somebody in his younger years did an avera, and you know he hasn't done tshuva, af im minuhu, even if you appointed him, ma'avir noisai, you remove him, the pasal ba'avera le'edus, because he would even be pasal le'edus based on the averis that he did. I always say, I found out the hardest piece of Hilchas Gittin, the halachos of how a get is given and how the Siddur HaGet is performed. So I learned Hilchas Gittin, but the first time I was involved in Siddur HaGet, I was an aide. That's when I found out the hardest halacha of all. And that's when the Mesader comes over to you before the Siddur HaGet and he says, do tshuva. You have to do tshuva. Otherwise you're pasal edus. So you have to do tshuva. And it's not just, yeah, do tshuva. Yeah, well, I did tshuva. No, you really got to sit down. You got to think. All right, listen, I'm going to do what I can. Avada, whatever Averis we did, we have charata on them, and we try not to do them again. Baruch Hashem, for the most part, we're not talking about people who do Averis b'shat nefesh. We're talking about Averis where the Yetzer Hara got the better of us. We're not doing them out of spite. We're not doing Averis, out of biut. We're not doing it with merida. It's something that the Yetzer Hara got. It's l'teyavain. The Yetzer Hara got the best of you. So you sit down and you do tshuva. But an Avera makes you apostle. Okay. Weiter. Says the Ramah. Top line, a little bit past the middle of the line. Shliach tzibbur shehu shoichet ubaydek. A shliach tzibbur, who's a wonderful fellow. He's a kolbay. He's a shliach tzibbur. He's also a shoichet. And he's also a baydek. He checks the animals to make sure that they're not treifas. Now that, it's a smelly job. When you shech, it's one thing when you shech chickens. Chickens aren't that messy. But even chickens, you get blood on you. But when you shech gasses, it's a dirty, smelly job. And baydek, the baydek has to put his hand into the cavity of the animal and go feel the insides of the lungs, etc., etc. So if you have a shliach tzibur who's a sheikh who baydek, lo yispal bebegadim atzayin umasrichen. The Ramah says he cannot daven for the Amid wearing his clothing that are soiled and smelly. And if he doesn't want to change out of his dirty clothing when it comes time to daven, so he's the official shliach tzibur, and it's time to daven mincha, and he just came from the shlachtos, and he doesn't want to change. He wants to go up to the Amid wearing his shlachtos clothing. Says the Ramah, no way. Ma'avir noisai, you remove him from the Amid. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ice Cut and Pay. Hatzayin, you have soiled clothing. So the Mishnah Berurah discusses an interesting case here. He says, shliach tzibur, if you have a shliach tzibur, shemitach chol yoy la'ansai, who because of some kind of an illness, some kind of an oinus, I efshal l'nakos l'hiyoisai taher mikre laila. He has a problem where he cannot be metaher, he can't cleanse himself, and he can't be metaher himself in a mikveh from seminal emissions. He has some kind of condition where he's experiencing, I guess, somehow a lot of these seminal emissions, and for some reason he's having difficulty cleaning himself. So that means that the shechva zera is on his guf, and he's not going to the mikveh. So there's two separate problems here. One problem is that he is soiled with shechva zera, which in certain ways has the same din as tzoya. So that's one problem. The other problem is a problem of tahara, but this is not real tahara. This is tahara from Takanas Ezra, right? We're going to learn about Takanas Ezra. Back in the day, Ezra was misakin that you can't daven, you can't learn Torah. Somebody who's tamei from Tumas Keri, he's also b'divrei Torah, maybe he's also b'tefillah, until he goes to the mikveh. That was Takanas Ezra. Now we're, for the most part, not noyeg Takanas Ezra nowadays, but I'm just pointing out that the Mishnah Berurah is pointing out here two different problems. One is a so to speak, physical problem of cleanliness. He's having a problem cleaning himself off from the shechva zera. The other one is more of a spiritual problem. It's a tomatara problem. He's not going to the mikveh from these seminal emissions. Ve'ein mitar atzmoi klal. He's not being mitaher himself at all. I think that means that not only is he not going to a mikveh, but he's not using tisha kabin. He's not even pouring 9 kav of water over himself, which is a lower standard, but a standard that could be mitar somebody for Takanas Ezra. V'hu shliach tzibur, and this person is a shliach tzibur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, efsher b'yamim noiraim, yesh ligar b'isha yitvoil. He says it could be that for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you could protest and object to him and tell him that he must be tovel in a mikveh. Because this already is Yom Adin. Yom Adin, a lot of us are noig, Takanas Ezra. People make sure to go to the mikveh before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But certainly the soiled clothing he has to take off. And if he does not listen to the Chachamim to make sure to cleanse himself well and to remove these soiled begadim, then it is proper to remove him from his position. When I read a Mishnah Berurah like this, sometimes I get the feeling that the Mishnah Berurah wrote this maybe to address a particular case that happened. This doesn't sound like something that would be so benimtza or shliach that the Chavetz Chaim had to write it over here in an ois cotton in the Mishnah Berurah, unless he included it in the Mishnah Berurah because he was aware of a problem that came up somewhere. Maybe he was once asked the Shaila, so he wanted to put it into the Sefer. I don't know. Ice cotton pay aleph if he doesn't want lahachlif, if the sheikh the baidik doesn't want to change his clothing. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we're talking about a sheikh and a baidik who's walking around wearing soiled, smelly clothing. The truth is, he has no business walking around bein abriyos amongst other people outside of the shlachtos wearing this clothing at all. He always should change. So that he should not be included in those people that are referred to in the Gemara as the masniim, the ones who cause chas v'chalila hatred to the Rabbeinu Shalom. What does this mean? There's a pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk in Mishlei says, Kol misanai ahavu maves. What that means is, Kol misanai, the Rabbeinu Shalom says, Kol misanai, all those who hate me, all my hated people, Kol misanai, I think it means the ones who hate me, ahavu maves, they love death. That's the pasuk. Kol misanai ahavu maves. The Gemara in Shabbos says, Al tikri misanai ela masni'i. You should read it masni'i, which means those who cause hatred to me, ehevu maves, they love death. The Gemara says, what does that mean? What does the Rebbe mean? People that cause hatred to me. So the Gemara says a Talmud Chacham that walks in the street with dirt on his clothing, that is somebody who is masni'i. That's somebody who causes hatred to me. How so? Because a Talmud Chacham represents the Torah Kedosha. A Talmud Chacham represents the way the Rabbeinu Shalom ultimately wants the world to be, the way things are supposed to be, according to the Torah Kedosha, according to the Ratzon HaBorei. If a Talmud Chacham, who is that representative, walks around in dirty clothing, then people look at him and say, oh, that's what the Torah is. Look, you want to see what the Torah is? You see that schlepper over there? You see the guy walking around smelly and filthy in the street? That's the Torah. Chas v'chalila. So they're causing hatred to the Torah, and by extension, hatred to the Rabbeinu Shalom, chas v'chalila. So that's the pasuk in Mishlei, Kol misanai evu maves. So says the Mishnah Berurah over here, this sheikhid ubaidik, really, he has no business walking around in the street amongst other people wearing dirty, smelly clothing at all. Forget being a shliach tzibbur. Shelo yehei bechlal hamasniim. He shouldn't be included in what we learn out from this pasuk of the masniim, the ones who cause hatred to the Torah and to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Because the same way the Gemara in Shabbos says that a Talmud Chacham can't walk out in the street with dirty clothing, kach shliach tzibbur, so to a shliach tzibbur. Aval b'shein a Talmud Chacham, even if he's not a Talmud Chacham. Says the Rambam weiter. Three lines down near the beginning of the line. Ushliach tzibbur amanabel piv. A shliach tzibur who says nivel peh. Now, nivel peh needs a little bit of explanation. We're used to thinking about nivel peh in the context of what colloquially would be called swear words, right? Go out on the street and listen to how the Eino Yehudim speak, and it's every third word in every single sentence is a disgusting word. And that's what we're used to calling nivel peh. But that's not the only nivel peh. Nivel peh is disgusting talk. Nivel peh is speaking inappropriately, speaking about inappropriate things, making inappropriate jokes, making inappropriate references, speaking about things that don't belong being spoken about in public, private things that are supposed to be kept private. That's also nivel peh. It doesn't only have to be the colloquial four-letter words that are nivel peh. There's no dictionary of words that this is nivel peh, but if you refrain from using those words, there's no such thing as nivel peh. Nivel peh is a disgusting mouth. So a shliach tzibbur hamenabel piv, who speaks nivel peh, oy shemeranein b'shirei hanochrim, or he sings non-Jewish songs. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to qualify that. Memachin biyadai shaloi laseis kein. We have to protest against him that he should not do this. Ve'emena shemeya, and if he doesn't listen and he continues doing these things, ma'virin oisa, you remove him. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ois cotton pebes. B'shirei anochrim. He sings non-Jewish songs. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does that mean? Ritzayin Eloymar, what the Ramah wants to say is, Benigun shehanochrim minagdim boy la'avodas gilulim shelahem. It doesn't just mean that you can't have a shliach tzibur that sings rock and roll. Now, rock and roll might, depending on the rock and roll song, might be nivel peh. There are non-Jewish songs that are not nivel peh. They're not Jewish songs, which is also a problem. But it's not nivel peh. So what the Chavetz Chaim is saying over here is, when Ramah says that non-Jewish songs, the singing of non-Jewish songs, is a problem for a shliach tzibur, and if he still does it, we remove him, we're not talking about just you caught him singing some non-Jewish song. I don't know, nothing is coming to my head, maybe because I'm not a bucky in non-Jewish songs, Baruch Hashem. But, I don't know. You found him singing some catchy non-Jewish song that he learned somehow, that he overheard. He works in a non-Jewish office, and they're playing the radio all day, and they're playing non-Jewish songs, and one of the non-Jewish songs stuck in his head, and it's a non-Jewish song that's not nivel peh, and he's singing that song. That song is not going to render him puzzled from being a shliach tzibur. Might not be nice, it might not be so appropriate, maybe you shouldn't do it anyway, but it's not going to render him puzzled from being a shliach tzibur if he refuses to stop doing it. The song that's going to make him puzzled from being a shliach tzibur is an avodah zarah song. If he's singing hymns that they sing in the base avodah zarah shalahem, if that's what he's singing, that's what makes him puzzled. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says here. We're talking about songs that they sing in praise of their avodah zarah. Ubach b'tshuva siman kuf chav zayin kasav, the Bach writes, dafka b'nigun shemiyuchad lazeh. Not only that, it has to be a song that's miyuchad for avodah zarah. So if there's a nice song that is a nice goyish song, and the goyim enjoy singing it in church, but it's not a church song. It's not really an avodah zarah song. It's just a nice song, so they sing it in church. That doesn't make it an avodah zarah song. It has to be an avodah zarah song. It's a hymn that they sing in church for an avodah zarah. It's an avodah zarah song. That's the song that makes him puzzle for being a shliach tzibur. Then there are also those that say that this doesn't mean that the shliach tzibur is walking in the street and singing this avodah zarah song. It means that he uses the avodah zarah song in shul. What does that mean? So I guess, like, you put him up for Kabbalah Shabbos, and he wants to have something original that nobody heard yet. And since he's a student of music, right, he listened to the church songs, and he figures nobody in shul knows that, so now I'll have a real original composition. And he uses one of the church songs in L'chadoidi. That's, you remove him from being a shliach tzibur. he's taking Avodah Zarah songs and he's bringing them into the Bismedrash, that you remove him. Reminds me of a very strange story that I had once. A friend of mine, I chanced upon him, and I see that he has a little piece of cloth, a little piece of parchment, and he has a tefillah written on it. It's not a mezuzah, it's not ketores, he has a tefillah, like a yiratzin. He has a tefillah written on a piece of parchment, in Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh. And it's written in Ashuris, everything. And I take it and I read it. And I recognized it right away. It's a famous Christian prayer. I'm not sure if it's called the Lord's Prayer, or I don't remember for sure. But it's a famous Christian prayer. I looked at him like he's crazy. I said, where did you get this from? Now, this fellow happens to be of Yerushalmi extraction. He's not an American. And he looked at me in shock. He said, a friend of mine gave this to me. And I said, wow, it's such a beautiful tefillah. So I had a sefer write 25 of them. And I've been handing them out to my friends. I said, it's a goyish tefillah. It's a prayer that was composed by a goy. It was composed by a galach. And you're writing it Lashon Kodesh on cloth and giving it out. In the end, this fellow ended up taking it and showing it to Reb Reuven. My Rebbe, Zal Zayin Gesund Stark Reb Reuven Feinstein Shlita. And Reb Reuven recognized it right away also. Reb Reuven said, get rid of it. It was written by a non-Jew. I even think the person who wrote it was a galach. He says it's not something that's right to be used by a yid. To get rid of it. So songs of Avodah Zarah, no place by us in our davening. Absolutely not. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah here in Ice Cotton Pei Beis. If somebody goes to have a case adjudicated in non-Jewish courts, he is possible to serve as a shliach tzibur on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, unless he did tshuva on the avera of going to a non-Jewish court to have a case adjudicated. So like the Mishnah Berurah says now, the Chavetz Chaim says, it seems to me, we're not talking about a case where a yid went to a non-Jewish court to have a case adjudicated, and by virtue of the fact that he went to a non-Jewish court, he won a court case, and now he is illicitly holding on to the money of another yid. If he would have gone to Beis Din, he would have lost. He went to a non-Jewish court, he won. So now really, halachically, he's holding on to Mammon Chaveroi, he's holding on to another yid's money illicitly. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's not what we're talking about here. In that case, obviously, you would have to remove him as being a shliach tzibur. He has gezel in his hand. He's holding on to stolen money. The chiddush over here is that we're talking about a case where he went to a non-Jewish court to have the case adjudicated, and the non-Jewish court adjudicated the case the same exact way Beis Din would. So he rightfully won the money, but it doesn't matter. Lamaisa, he did an avera, he went to a non-Jewish court. And if he did that without reshus, then he has to do tshuva on that avera. So like the Mishnah Berurah says here, we're talking about a case where the result of the non-Jewish court case was the same as the Beis Din's would have been. Still in all, this person who went to a non-Jewish court is possible to serve as a shliach tzibur on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. Because this itself, going to a non-Jewish court, is an avera. Because if that's not the case that we're talking about, somebody who's puzzled because of an avera, like illicitly holding on to somebody else's money, he can't be a shliach tzibur not only Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So why is the Ramah saying somebody who went to Arkoi Shel Goyim can't be about a shliach tzibur on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? If he went to a non-Jewish court and therefore he's illicitly holding on to somebody else's money, then he can't be a shliach tzibur all year. Elamai, we're talking about somebody who went to a non-Jewish court, but the money that he won, he was entitled to win al pi halacha. Still, he can't be a shliach tzibur on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur because he went to Arkoi Shel Goyim without reshus. V'ulai, possibly, says the Mishnah Berurah, Bismanenu nowadays, ba'avinisenu arabim d'nishtaka cho'isr mikaba anoshim, where many people don't even realize that this is usr, ve'efshir duhu shoygeg badavar, and therefore it's very possible that he's a shoygeg in this, that he went to our kodesh shel nachrim. Ein lepasla, you shouldn't pasel him. The kediisa ke'ein zeh b'cheshevish but siman lamadal sif dalad ba'aga ayin sham. V'al kalpanim, nevertheless, le'edin shliach tzibbur Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim b'vada yesh lahachmir. Shliach tzibbur shayah shoichet, if a shliach tzibbur was also a shoichet. V'nimtze shamachar treifa b'cheskas kshera b'shoigeg. So you have a yid, he's a shoichet. He's also a shliach tzibbur. He went, he shechted an animal, and he sold the meat to somebody, b'cheskas kashrus. No, somebody got the meat, somehow he went and asked a shayla about something, and he found out it's treif. And they go to the shoichet, and the shoichet, they find out that the shoichet goofed. He didn't do it b'mezid. He goofed. Maybe he forgot a halacha. I don't know. He goofed. But he gave out treifa meat b'shoigeg. Or another case, shahaya menaker. He's not the shoichet, he's the menaker. The menaker is the one who removes the chelev, the forbidden fats, from the meat. The nimtzachar of chelev. And he went, he gave meat to somebody, and then the Rav checks the meat, and they find out that the nikor was not done properly. There's still chelev on the meat. But again, he did it b'shoigeg. Even though you don't remove him from his appointed position as being the shliach tzibur, such a person should not be appointed initially to be a shliach tzibur, even though he did it b'shoigeg. But if he does tshuva, then you could appoint him even initially, like we saw earlier. If you have a excuse me, if you have somebody, a kehillah, who contracted a shliach tzibur for a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, now the shliach tzibur, he got a terrible cold on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and he can't daven. He does not have the right to go appoint a substitute. Now the kehillah might ask him to do that. The kehillah might even hold him responsible to do that. Maybe when they hired him, they might tell him, look, if you get sick within X amount of days before Rosh Hashanah, you're responsible to find us a stand-in. That's not what the Mishnah Berurah is talking about. The Mishnah Berurah is talking about that never happened. He was contracted, he got sick, and now he wants to claim the right to go appoint somebody else. He does not have that right. It's the kehillah that has the right to go ahead and appoint somebody else. Not him. He doesn't have the right to do it. Okay, let's go a little bit weiter over here. 3 lines off the bottom, a little bit past the halfway mark in the Ramah. Shliach tzibur shehizkin, a shliach tzibur who got old. And he wants to appoint his son to help him out every now and then. So this is a shliach tzibur kavua. He davens for the Amud, let's say, every Shabbos. And he's old, and it's getting hard for him. So he wants to have his son daven in his stead, once a month, once every other month. Says the Ramah, even if the son doesn't have as good a voice as the father, if he is a worthy memala to his father in other areas, in other words, tzidkas, in everything else, he's a worthy malamakam of his father, just his voice isn't as good, then the Chazan's son, Taka, comes first before anybody else. And the tzibur cannot protest and say, listen, if you can't daven for the Amud, we want to put up somebody else. No, the tzibur has the right to occasionally put his son in instead of him. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Pei Gimel, Shliach tzibur shehizkin, v'hu adin b'chol minuyim gan kein b'noi kodim. This is not only by a chazan. The daf yomi shir. He wants to put in his son every now and then, he can. V'afil yesh acherim gedolim mimenu, even if there are people that are better than him. There is an inyan of the son being Mamalamakam for the father. Yesh, I remember there are those that say the Bechacham HaMamuna Laharbitz Torah, that when it comes to a Magid Shir, a Lodun or a Dayan, Lo Yamrinan Shibanein Kaidman, then we don't say that a son has precedence, has Kedima, even if there are other people that are bigger than him, but V'yesh Cholkin. Ayin Mamagan Avram Meknes Agdola, but it's Tamid Rishos Chasam Sefer, Chelik Archaim Siman Yud Gimel. Okay. Pei Dalid, V'roitze, the father wants to put in his son on occasion. Kasav Arash B'Sham, who adid the B'cholim Yanim Menuyim, and Roitze Amani Shechadi Sayed B'Yis Aminu L'Prakim, Harishus B'Yadai. It always works this way, that whatever appointment somebody has, if he needs somebody to stand in for him or help him every now and then, he has the rishus to get someone to do that. The Kasav Gdes Agdoil Dafke V'Roy L'Kach, he has to be worthy. Hein B'Inyan HaMalacha, Hein B'Yiras Shamayim. Ice Cut and Pei, the Ramah said he could put his son in even if his voice isn't as good. Arev. It's okay if the son's voice isn't quite as good as the father's voice. But if the son has a strange voice, then all bets are off. Then you can't do that. You cannot remove one shliach tzibur to take a different one who has a better voice. But if most of the killer does want the other one, both of them should serve together. Not exactly sure what that means. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This is limud HaTorah should be banging against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua Sefur's Parnasa should do him to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'meher of Yameinu. Amen. Be well.